Hello, this is Jet Smith. I'm the head coach at Highland High School in Pocatello, Idaho, and this video is going to teach you how to cut a card. Now, the reason why it's called a card is because in the olden days, before everyone had easy access to laptops and computers to get all of their evidence, you would go to libraries and get newspapers and then get 3x5 note cards and copy things down from books and newspapers onto those 3x5 note cards. Now we just call them cards because that's kind of how evidence has always been labeled. But this video is going to teach you how to cut a card, 2020 style. So this year the topic is criminal justice reform. And there are going to be 5 different areas of criminal justice reform that novices will debate if they go to tournaments. That includes the death penalty, qualified immunity, abolishing immigration and custom reforms, decriminalization of marijuana, and reforming facial recognition technology. So those are like the 5 areas that novices will particularly be concerned with. So I'm going to try and find evidence today about the death penalty area of the topic. I want to find some evidence that says that recently the federal government has started doing executions again after years of not doing that. So I'm going to use Google Chrome because that's definitely my favorite browser. And I'm going to go ahead and look for some evidence. So it looks like when I first pull this up, the first 2 things are a Wikipedia article and the Justice Department. You don't want to necessarily get evidence from the Justice Department on the criminal justice topic because they have a particular bias in favor of criminal justice reform one way or the other. You don't want to use Wikipedia because it's much more of like a baseline get your information to learn about something source than it is you should use this as evidence. But now I'm seeing that from the New York Times in 2019 that there's an article about resuming capital punishment. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And now what I do is I want the evidence to say that the federal government is going to resume executions. So the very first line says the federal government will resume executions of death row inmates after a nearly 2-year hiatus. So now I am going to take the article, and if it's a really long article, then you might just want to read the whole thing, and then just copy the part that you actually want to cite. So I will copy, then I'll go to my Word document, I'm going to hit enter twice, and I'll explain why later. Then you're going to paste and keep the text only so that it gets rid of all of the formatting issues. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through the article, see the parts of it that we want to read, and we're going to underline those parts. So the federal government will resume executions of death row inmates after nearly a 2-decade hiatus. So we can underline that. And then the announcement reversed what has become a moratorium on the federal death penalty since 2003. We can underline that. Prosecutors still seek the death penalty in some federal cases. That might be useful information. The federal government has only executed 3 inmates since it reinstated the death penalty in 1988. So let's see if there's anything else in here that we might find useful. President Trump has long supported the death penalty. And then everything else looks like it's how people feel about whether or not it's been reinstated. So I don't really need the rest of the article because I got what I needed from the very first part. So now that I've taken the parts of the article that said what I was looking for, and I've underlined them. So now I'm going to take these bits and fragments, sentences, and paragraphs, I'm going to make them all come into one main paragraph. Also, when you do this, if you see anything like advertisement language that got copied, you'll want to delete that because that's not important to what you're trying to say. So now it should look like this big block. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of the stuff that we haven't underlined and we're going to change the font size to 8. By the way, the pretty much official font that we always use when we're cutting evidence is Calibri. And if it's underlined, you're going to want to keep it to size 11. And if it's not underlined, then you're going to want to move it to size 8. This way, when you go to read the evidence, it's really easy to just read the underlined parts. But if your opponents want to be able to see the parts of the card you didn't read, they can still read the tinier font. Ooh, accidentally made that one bigger. Okay, so now all of the relevant information to our claim is underlined, but we're not just going to read every single word that we underlined. We're now going to go through the second editing process, which is when we highlight the words that we actually want to read out loud. So the federal government will resume executions of death row inmates after a nearly 2-decade hiatus. I think we can say all of that, so we'll highlight it. The announcement reversed a moratorium on the federal death penalty since 2003. I don't think we need to say the prosecutors still seek the death penalty in some federal cases. We can say the federal government has only executed 3 inmates since 1988. And then we can also highlight President Trump has long supported the death penalty. So now we have our card that says what we want it to. So we need to make sure that we do 3 things. We need to make sure that we cite the evidence. We need to make sure that we have a tag for the evidence, and then we need to read the card out loud so that we can tell that it makes sense. So a really awesome Google Chrome extension is something called Cite Creator, and if you just Google verbatim Cite Creator, you can download it, and what it does is it puts a debate-approved citation in the bottom corner of each website. Some websites will give you better citations than others, and it will give you a grade for how good the citation is in the top right corner. So this one, for example, gets a B because it has no publication, but the publication is the New York Times. So if you don't have this, which I'm assuming most of you won't, you can Control-C or copy the link for the article, and then you can just use whatever citation machine that you like to use. I personally like to use EasyBib. Although EasyBib does usually make you watch an ad, so Cite Machine usually works better for me, even though they look extremely similar. So we'll go to Create Citations. It's a website. Paste the article. Now we'll cite this. Then we want to make sure that we can go through and check to make sure the citation's actually correct. There's the article title, Katie Benner. Is that the name? Yep. July 25th, 2019. Access this day. Okay, it looks good. So we'll hit complete citation. And now we can copy the citation. So then we go back here, and on this line, we will paste without formatting. So now we have our citation. So when you have your full citation, you want to italicize it so that people can tell the difference between your citation and the card. And now the last thing that we want to do is we want to add a tagline. Now, a tagline is a short description of the evidence that you're about to read, or what your claim based off of the evidence is. And what that does is when you read a card, people will hear the tagline, and that's what they will flow, because people don't have enough time to be able to flow the whole card, and they might not know what the most important piece of the evidence is. So the tagline tells people what to write down. So for this one, I'm going to make the tagline, in 2019, the federal government resumed executing people through the death penalty. So when we write a tagline, the formatting that we usually use is we make it bold and we use size 13 font. So it should look like this. And then in addition to that, we want to press enter and we want to write down the last name of our author, so Benner, followed by the year that the card was published, so 2019. So if I were to read this piece of evidence out loud, it would sound like, in 2019, the federal government resumed executing people through the death penalty. Benner 2019. The federal government will resume executions of death row inmates after a nearly 2-decade hiatus. The announcement reversed a moratorium on the federal death penalty since 2003. The federal government has only executed 3 inmates since 1988. President Trump has long supported the death penalty. So you read the tagline, you read the last name and date of the citation, but we still want to provide the citation so people know we didn't lie about our evidence, and then we read the highlighted part of the card. So some tools that will make writing cards easier. Number one is to get Verbatim itself. Verbatim is a Word template that adds a bunch of debate tools, and all of the stuff that I had to do by hand, debate from Verbatim actually lets you just do those things on your own. So, for example, let's go back to the New York Times article that we were on, and I'll just take these 3 random pieces of the card, paste that without formatting. Let's say that I want to make it all one paragraph. I can just press condense. Let's say that I want to underline. I can just press underline. Now, let's say that I want to shrink the parts of the card that are not underlined, and I can press shrink and it will do that for me. And now I'm going to highlight some pieces of the card. When I want to do my tagline, I just press the tag button, and then I type in whatever the tag is. When I want to do the citation, I can just 19, and then I would come and just copy this citation right here and put it here. So Verbatim is a very good tool, but even if you don't have Verbatim, I would recommend getting their Site Creator, which you can download as a Google Chrome extension from the Verbatim website. And that will make getting citations that are approved for debate much easier. You don't have to use MLA or APA formatting for the purpose of a debate round, although some coaches prefer that you do. And that is pretty much it. So thank you for watching this video on how to cut a card, and I will see you in the next one.